Hello and welcome to episode 8 of AAGT Informs. We are so glad that you were able to join us as we learn the cure for the common classroom. We hope that you will engage with us in the chat and use the Q&A feature so we can address any questions you have at the end of the session. As a reminder, if you're enjoying this free series, please consider supporting AAGT by joining as a member. Membership dues help us continue to provide resources and webinars like these as a service to all gifted supporters in Arizona. Plus, as an added bonus, we have Renzulli Learning as a partner. Educators that sign up as members with AAGT will receive a 6-month free trial for the classroom, and parents who join with AAGT will receive a 1-year free subscription to Renzulli Learning Home Edition. So if you go over to our website and join, you'll get the access to both of those. As a reminder, we also have our AAGT Parent Institute coming up on October 17th, 2020. This event will be virtual, so you will have access to all of the recorded breakout sessions as well as access to the live session with Otto Siegel as he shares the joy of being gifted with all of us. So make sure you register early and secure your spot. Be sure to join us next Wednesday, August 26th at 4 o'clock for episode 9 of AAGT Informs. Julie Gunagal and a special mystery guest will be focusing on addressing the needs of our twice exceptional students during these uncertain times. Julie herself has assured me that this presentation will be awesome and you won't want to miss it. Register early to ensure your spot. It is my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Dr. Jason McIntosh. Jason is the Gifted Service Coordinator from Washington Elementary School District in Phoenix, Arizona, and an independent education consultant. After receiving his doctorate in Gifted, Talented, and Creative Studies from Purdue University in 2015, he developed a passion for curriculum design for gifted learners and has won the NAGC Curriculum Award 4 years in a row. Jason has also served on the executive committee for AAGT several years, fulfilling various roles including president, conference chair, and treasurer. Thank you for joining us today, Jason. I'll let you take the floor.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here today. It would be better if we could be in person, but we know that under these circumstances, this is what we're going to get. So let me go ahead and present my screen here today. I'm going to talk to you about problem-based learning. And if Heather, if you could tell me if you can see the PowerPoint up on your screen.
We are good to go.
All right, awesome. Problem-based learning really is a passion of mine, and it's grown over time. I started out dabbling in it, and finally feel like I've not mastered it by any means, but I've learned some tips and tricks that I'm excited to share with you today. The questions I'm going to answer are: what is problem-based learning? Or you're going to see PBL throughout the presentation, and we know that there's problem-based learning and then there's project-based learning. If it doesn't specify, I'm referring to problem-based learning when you see that PBL. But we are going to talk about that second question is, of course, how is problem-based learning different from project-based learning? We're going to talk about what the research says about problem-based learning, what the flow of a problem-based learning lesson looks like in comparison to a typical lesson, how to create your own problem-based learning scenarios, how to assess students, what tools and resources are available for you to reach out to and read or communicate with or download. And we're going to talk about, is it possible to turn a problem-based learning lesson into an integrated curriculum model unit? And I'll steal my own thunder and say absolutely, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. In the chat though, what I'd like for you to do is take this little pretest. If you could type 1 through 5, 1 meaning not at all, 5 meaning I'm an expert, How familiar are you with problem-based learning? All right, thank you, thank you. It's really important to always assess your students. I'm thinking of you as my students today. Before you launch into anything, it's more difficult and challenging for me to differentiate for you given the circumstances, but it's nice to know where your learners are starting from. So thank you for taking the time to give me that feedback. When you think about education and the purpose of education, it goes beyond just preparing workers for today's world, but that is a part of it, right? So when employers are asked, what is it that you want your employees to possess when they come into your organization? What are the habits, the behaviors that you want them to have? Well, they tell us, and there's research behind this, of course, they want workers that are good at communicating. They want workers that are honest. They want workers that have technical competency, meaning they know what they're doing. But also, this is the most important part, I believe, they want their workers to be flexible, creative, and be able to solve problems on their own. King and Kitchener, I love this quote, state that one of the most important responsibilities educators have is helping students learn to make defensible judgments about vexing problems. When you look at the world today, we certainly know we're facing quite a few vexing problems. And so our job is to help our students analyze all the information that's coming at them from every direction to make a defensible judgment, use their critical thinking, and solve problems. The only way to create thinkers like that is to repeatedly force students to think. And one method for doing that is inquiry. There are different forms of inquiry we're going to talk about here in a second, but one of the great things about inquiry is that it's student-centered and the students are doing a majority of the work. And what we know is the one doing the work is the one growing the dendrites in the brain. And many times I think teachers very well-meaningly do too much for their students. And so this is a quick reminder to say, you know, release that control, release some of that, and let the students do the thinking, ask the questions, and solve the problems. So here you see the 4 broad types of inquiry, and it ranges from teacher-led all the way down to more student-led. So with confirmation inquiry, as you see, more teacher-led, the goal is for the students to confirm the results, confirm the data that you already know of, that has already been established. Structured inquiry, you give the students the question and you give them the method for how to find the answer, and then you release them to do that. Guided inquiry, you give them the question and that's it. But open inquiry, you don't even give them the question. You leave it up to them to sort through the data, sort through the mess, sort through the vexing problem, and form their own questions, design their own investigative methods, and carry out their own inquiry, and then finally to present that. And that's what problem-based learning is. It's open inquiry with the goal that students learn the content that they need to learn. You know, those Common Core standards and Arizona state standards are still important, but another goal of problem-based learning is problem solving, conceptual reasoning, that they learn how to research, that they learn how to think, that they develop the disposition of a scholar, and that they develop ethics. The history of problem-based learning really began in the 80s in the medical field. There was a professor who, you know, he worked really hard at his overhead presentations, if you can remember those overhead projectors. He had the students taking notes, he gave them lots of quizzes, he did, you know, drill. And at the end of the class, that went on to a practicum. And what he found is that many of his students failed the practicum because they knew the information, but they didn't know how to apply it in the real world. And so he decided to totally flip how he taught his classes. And he started with bringing in a fake patient, a fictitious person who says, oh man, my stomach's really hurting, and oh, I have a headache and I'm sweating. And the students had to diagnose what they thought was going on, do the research, and figure out how to help that person. And he threw his overhead slides out the window because he found that at the end of his courses, they could then think about the material and act on it. They knew it, they could apply it. And then in the 90s, problem-based learning began to filter into K-12. In the world of gifted education, Jim Gallagher, he recently passed away a few years ago, was taking on that mantle and applying it to the field of gifted ed. He did a lot of writing. Now his daughter, Sheila Gallagher, has taken over and is continuing his research. So how would we really define problem-based learning? Well, number one, it's a student-centered approach to teaching in which students learn about a subject through the experience of solving an open-ended problem. Open-ended. There isn't a set solution. And Sheila Gallagher, the person I mentioned earlier, another reason why this is such an amazing strategy is that it's engaging for all. All kids, all learners enjoy problem-based learning. And you can easily differentiate problem-based learning by the amount of scaffolding and support you give students as they're working through the problem. So what does research say? We always want to tie what we're doing back to research. There have been over 300 studies on problem-based learning, and it's probably one of the most well-researched topics in all of education. Studies show that yes, students learn just as much content through problem-based learning as they would through a traditional lesson. Just as much content. But there's also the added benefit of improvement in higher order thinking and higher student satisfaction and engagement. Those are two amazing side effects that go right along with that content. We have to teach the content, but why not get more bang for our buck and increase students' higher order thinking skills and let them have some fun along the way. In a way, problem-based learning is kind of like an apprenticeship. The teacher becomes a facilitator instead of someone up in front of the class just talking and demonstrating and lecturing. It's more of a hands-on training where they get that theoretical conceptual knowledge, but they also get the opportunity to apply it. In a typical lesson, it's usually the teacher standing up in front of the class and they teach. The students are learning and learning. They are asking questions. Maybe the teacher asks some questions. They learn some more. And at the very end, the teacher will give them a problem to solve to prove that they learned it. Well, problem-based learning flips this on its head. And it starts with the problem. So you give them the messy, ill-structured problem at the beginning. The students ask questions about that problem. They learn from the questions that they've asked because they do the research and you support them along the way. You introduce more information, they do some more learning, and it just completely flips it on its head. Teaching this way can feel uncomfortable at first because in essence, the curriculum is coming from the students because what you're doing in the classroom is all based on those questions that the students are asking about the curriculum or about the topic, about the problem that you've posed to them. So like those three pictures show, I like the one in the middle where the fish are jumping into the boat instead of the fishermen throwing the fishing pole line out into the water. But teaching this way requires that we let it go. I would sing for you, but you probably might not enjoy that. So I'm going to save you that. But what do you think it is that we're letting go? Type in the chat what you think it is when we say teaching with problem-based learning requires teachers to let it go. Very good. Absolutely. It's letting go a lot of the control. It's letting go of um, being the sage on the stage. It's letting go of traditional notions of what school is all about. And it, like I said, it can be uncomfortable at the beginning, but with practice, it becomes second nature, and you can't imagine teaching any other way. So let me give you a couple examples. This is an example that is in a unit that I wrote called Feats and Flops. And in this example, if you see to the right, it says, which do you prefer? So I could come into my class and I could say, we're going to learn about the effective way to manage resources today. And I could list on the board how to do that. We could talk about it. We could watch a little video and the kids could take notes. Or I could present them with a messy situation. So here it is. And what I do is I tell the students, I want you to imagine that you opened up the newspaper and you saw this article and it says local student wins 10 tons of flour on game show. And I'll summarize this for you. The student, the contestant in the game show won the Zonk prize. And so they have to get rid of this 10 tons of flour, and we want them to do it in a responsible way. And so the students read this, and then they're told, oh, by the way, this student, this candidate, this person who was on the game show is one of your friends and has come to you asking for advice. Here's another example. I could start out my lesson by saying, did you know there are invasive plants in Arizona? Here's a list. I want you to choose one and go research it. Make a PowerPoint. All right, that's a very traditional approach. Or I could manage it this way. I could tell the students, hey, guess what? You just received an invitation from the governor of Arizona, and here it is. He's inviting you to join this committee called PLANTS, which is an acronym for Plant Lovers Against Non-Native Trees and Shrubs. And he wants you to come to this meeting so that you can help tackle this problem of invasive species. And then after the second day, I would have the students come into my class and I might say, hey, guess what? He sent an advance agenda for what's going to happen at the first meeting. Here it is. Take a look at it. What do you think? What do you think you're going to talk about? What are the questions that you have? And they have to sort through all the information to figure out what they're going to talk about, and it proceeds from there. And in the end, what I do is I have the students focus on Roman numeral 7. I ask them to investigate one of those 3 and come up with their own solution, a practical solution that they're going to take to the governor on how to tackle that invasive species. And here's another example. This comes from Michelle Younghands, and I think she's on here today. Wonderful teacher from Littleton, and she created this problem-based learning scenario. So I could come into the class one day and say, we're going to learn about archaeology. Archaeology is the study of ancient peoples. I want you to read this chapter in your social studies book about archaeology and then answer the questions at the end. You've lost the students. Boring, right? Or you could phrase it like Michelle did. She gave them this information, and this is actually a true scenario. Construction of the new Fry store in downtown Phoenix has been suspended. While excavating the land to begin the store's foundation, construction workers found evidence of a prehistoric artifact. This grocery store was scheduled to be completed in January of 2017, but after discovering this artifact, plans for the building may be on hold for an undetermined amount of time. It did actually open up a few months ago, or I think 6 months ago. But the scenario continues where they are told that you've got Red Development, which is the company that's building the grocery store, and you've got the city of Phoenix and the Historical Society and the Archaeological Society. There's a mess. One group wants to build it now, one group wants to study the history. What are you going to do? It's a problem. It's an interesting problem that the kids have to sort through. One of the cool things you'll notice about problem-based learning is that it relies on storytelling and the power of story. All 3 of those examples have a story to them where the students become the protagonist. They are inserted into the problem. They have to take ownership of it. I went to a wonderful session at NAGC, the National Association for Gifted Children, a breakout session at their conference several years ago. And the speakers talked about putting swag in your lessons, and that was an acronym for story, wonder, authenticity, and grit. And I thought, wow, that is a perfect analogy or perfect metaphor for problem-based learning, because you do put story and wonder, and it is real, and grit. It takes grit to solve these problems. Another reason why story is important is because we know, scientists know, that it is neurobiologically impossible to think deeply about things that you don't care about. Have you ever been given an assignment or a task and you're just dreading it? You have no interest in it whatsoever. It's just a hoop you have to jump through. Your motivation is pretty low, right? But if you care about it, if you're in the scenario, if you're presented with the story, it makes a difference. And Brene Brown says, we use stories because stories are data with a soul. And I just love that. So we've talked a lot about problem-based learning, and let's talk just for a second about project-based learning. Please do not think that I am anti-project-based learning. I would never say that. I would never advocate for anything against project-based learning, but if I have a preference, I will always go to problem-based learning, and I'll explain why here in just a second. Project-based learning is, of course, student-centered, just like problem-based learning, but the whole point is for the students to create a project, and they learn through the creation of the project, and it's driven by a driving question. Very good, nothing wrong with that. But this is from Sheila Gallagher. The danger with project-based learning is that many times the product takes precedence over the thinking, and the students get all caught up in the project, and the thinking and the learning takes second fiddle. Now, if done properly, project-based learning, according to the Buck Institute on Education, they've created what they call the gold standard project-based learning way. If you check out Buck Institute on Education, their website, you can read all about it. Then it's very, very similar to problem-based learning, but you don't see that type of project-based learning often in the classroom. Here's an example of project-based learning, and this will be a great example. So we have a teacher who read 2 books to their students, one fiction and one nonfiction about castles. And then the teacher puts the students in groups, asks them to talk about how the castles are represented in the fiction versus the nonfiction, and then she gives, or he gives, each one of the groups a different material to build their own castle. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. Problem-based learning, in my opinion, takes it a little farther than that. So let's talk about the flow of a problem-based learning scenario or lesson. What does this look like? Because it's totally different from a traditional lesson like we've already established. I'm going to use the little diagram on the left here, and that green arrow is going to show you where we are in the flow of the lesson. The very beginning, it's the engagement piece. You present the problem to the students. That's simple. You say, hey, guess what? I came across this, or you received this letter, or here it is, read through it. What do you think? And as the students are engaging with the problem, what they do is they complete what's called a need to know board. So they analyze that problem and they ask themselves, what do I know about this problem? And many times I will say, they might not know exactly what the problem is yet, because it can be so convoluted that there may be multiple problems embedded in it. So they're just going to write down everything that's known. And then in the second column, they're going to write down what needs to be learned. What do they need to know in order to sort through the problem to determine what the real problem is, and then possibly how to solve the problem. Many people are now using, instead of the need to know board, Sheila Gallagher has adopted what's called a learning issues board, and it looks like this, where they start with hunches. What do we know? Here's some learning issues, and here's a plan of action. I still prefer the need to know board, but you may disagree with me, and that's fine. Okay, so you've given the students the problem. There it is. Now, what do? Now, stage 2, it's the inquiry and investigation stage. This is where students are put into small groups. You call them research teams. They work together to start researching answers to their questions. That's going to take time. It's not going to be a quick thing. One thing I will say is in the beginning, problem-based learning takes a little bit longer because the students aren't used to it. And many of our students come to us, especially in lower elementary, without having solid research skills. So you may have to do a lot of filling in of how to do research, the proper search terms, the right resources, how to check your resource to make sure it's valid and it's true, that kind of thing. But they really dive into this investigating that problem. And by the way, and when I design problem-based learning tasks many times, there are things in there that they're not going to be able to find on the internet or in a book because it might be specific to that problem, like a client that they have to solve a problem for this client. And the client may have particular needs and they may say, well, I can't find on Google what this client needs. Well, then I just say, oh, let me get them on the phone and give them a call. And I pretend to hold up my phone and I ask questions and I make it up. So you can always do that too. It makes it fun that way too. As far as working in groups, there are many ways to break down your kits into groups. So let's say there was a problem-based learning task about how to keep the fairways green on a golf course. Well, you could break down your individual group into this. You could have one person be the PGA official, one person be an EPA scientist, one person be the owner of the golf course, etc. Or you could have groups, one group be the PGA officials, one group be the scientists, etc. But you can also break it down into the tasks that they're going to complete. Like one person needs to be the recorder, one's going to be the timekeeper, one's going to be the materials manager, all those strategies and routines that many teachers use. But there are also social, emotional, and behavioral supports where you can assign your students. You're going to be the praiser for your group. You're going to encourage and compliment people in your group today. You're going to be the reminder. You're going to be the quiet captain. And if they're working online doing research, and let's say you have 3 kids are on one computer, well, you may want to use this. You may want to say, okay, you're going to be the search pilot, which means you're the only one whose fingers actually touch the keyboard. You're going to be the search navigator. You're the one who's going to decide where the search pilot takes the search. You're going to be the information recorder, and so on. So there are ways to facilitate this even with young students. There are contracts you can use that have the students think about and their behavior in that group, and that they make a commitment to each other that they're gonna work collaboratively, and they sign it. That these actually come from the Buck Institute, which means that they were created for project-based learning, but they work perfectly for problem-based learning too. Here's where the team could actually plan out a schedule for what they're gonna do and when. And there are collaboration rubrics. The one on the left is for younger students and the one on the right is for older students. Okay, so now that they've done some initial investigating into the problem, they've asked their questions, they know what they know and they know what they need to know. Then you move on to the problem definition stage, which is stage 3. Here, because like I said, there may be multiple interpretations of the mess. You may want to introduce a little bit more information and then ask the students this: what is the problem? Write one sentence that describes the problem that you think we are solving in this scenario. So for new information, what we did, Michelle and all the group of teachers that taught this unit that she developed, was we gave them additional information. Okay, so now we know that you are going to take the role of Red Development and you're going to take the role of the Archaeological Society. Well, they want a proposal for you and it's due on this day, and here's what has to be in the proposal. The city council will then weigh through it and determine which one they're going to go with. Here is new information from my Feats and Flops unit. I love this adding new information in because it's fun to throw a kink in things. So in this example, they are working for a client who has a problem, and their Innovations Are Us is the name of their company. Well, they do their work, they do some research, they have their ideas. And then I say, oh, we got some feedback from the client. And then they have to roll a die. And based on what they roll, that will tell them what the client thinks of their idea, which means they may have to go back and start over, or they can combine some of their ideas, and it just keeps things interesting. A problem statement for that archaeology example, the Phoenix downtown archaeology example, might be, we think the problem statement is, how can we preserve and explore the past while building a needed grocery store in a reasonable time frame? That's a nice synopsis. And you don't give them the problem statement, you guide them through it and help them along the way. If you have two groups that have a difference of opinion on what the real problem is, that's okay too. Let them talk it out. Next is the resolution, the problem resolution step. Here's where they do more research, and it is an iterative process. So you don't just start at the top and go down. You do start at the top, but you can go back and forth between inquiry and definition and debriefing, and you can do this multiple ways. But stage 4 is where they work together, they come up with a list of ideas, and they choose one. They choose their best idea after they've done their research. And you have to teach students, especially young ones, how to disagree with ideas and not people. You can have a logic elimination grid to help the kids figure out which of their ideas is best. They can have a vote. You can do a Socratic seminar. Lots of ways to teach kids how to discuss and debate things. And then after they have come up to they've gotten their conclusion, their solution, then they present what their solution is to the group, to the class. And then at the end, it's the debriefing stage. This is really super, super important because research tells us that students don't learn from what they don't reflect on. And many times we get to the solution and we think, we're done, yay, let's go on to the next unit. But you have to stop and ask them, what did you learn from this problem? What did you learn from doing this, going through this process? And one way to do that is use that need to know board. I love that last column that says what was learned, where they can just write it down and discuss it as a group. And there are all kinds of reflection tools and rubrics out there to help them think through what they learned. Now, if you wanted to design your own problem-based learning scenario, I wanted to give you a few tips on how to do that. So the first thing you'll want to do is choose a grade level. The second thing you will want to do is choose the content you want to teach. What is what are the standards that you want to teach? What is the meat of the unit going to be about? Here's an example from my Microscopic Monsters and the Scientists Who Slay Them unit. So I've listed all my STEM goals here, what I want the students to know by the end of the problem-solving process. Then you're going to develop the problem, okay? And when you're developing your problem, you have to be very, very careful because research shows, number one, children are instinctively drawn to novel problems. So you want it to be interesting and kind of offbeat. But we also know that not all problems present the same cognitive demand. You know, tying your shoes with your eyes closed is not as difficult as let's say, cooking a meal from scratch you've never cooked before. Two different problems, especially if you didn't have a recipe, right? Two different problems, two different cognitive levels of cognitive demand. And you want to make sure that your problem is ill-structured. We want it to be messy and fuzzy, ill-defined. We want it to be mysterious. It means that there's some unclear elements in there, some elements that can change. We want your problem to be authentic, meaning it could really happen based in the real world. We want your problem to be flexible, meaning if there's only one solution to the problem, it's not a good candidate for problem-based learning. We want it to be ambiguous and we want it to be interdisciplinary. Problem-based learning is perfect. It's a perfect way to teach math, science, social studies, and language arts all at the same time instead of in a silo. We want that problem also to be intentional, productive, illuminating, and of course, developmentally appropriate. Excuse me. Okay, so I'm going to show you two examples. I want you to think about how mysterious, authentic, flexible, ambiguous, or interdisciplinary this example is. So it says, you are the owner of a store. In the last 2 weeks, your profits have gone down 50%. Analyze your bank records and create a 5-point plan for addressing the problem. Is there story there? A little, absolutely. The students are in the scenario. But is it mysterious? Meaning they have to figure out what the problem is. They have to figure out what to do. No, it tells them right there in that little scenario. Is it authentic? Yeah, it could happen. Is it flexible? Not really. Is it ambiguous? Not really. Interdisciplinary? Not really. It's basically looking at math, right? Here's another scenario. This is from that same microscopic monsters unit. So here I asked the students to pretend that they are an elected official of a small town. They're receiving reports of a new virus crossing the nation. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? That causes ordinary people to do nothing but eat broccoli and pickles while standing on their heads and watching television 24 hours a day. You quickly realize that this would bring your town to a complete standstill. 2 neighboring cities have now reported active cases, and it's spreading quickly. Create an emergency plan to keep the virus out of your town. It's a lot more ambiguous, a lot more flexible and mysterious than that first example. I have a template for helping teachers work through how to create a problem-based learning unit, and you can find this PowerPoint and the handout on my website, which is www.notmoreofthesame.com, and I call it my website that because gifted students need different work, not more of the same. Okay. You want to be creative, and this is the most fun I have. I love designing lessons because I get to have fun. Here's some tips though. Here's some tips, some very important pieces here to help you as you're working through your first problem-based learning task if you're new to it. Of course, the goal here is that the students have to persevere, they have grit, and they have to, we want productive struggle, right? If you look at this picture here of the baby trying to get the cookie, grit comes from the result of desire. You want to design your problem so that the students really want to have a solution, have an answer, right? Here's the first tip. When you see students struggle, because they will, doing their research or trying to solve the problem, it's so tempting for teachers to rush in and help. Immediately give the answer, tell them where to go, tell them what to do. And what we know is that giving answers like that kills all thinking, right? So what you have to do is subtly use the power of questioning. So instead of me running up and saying, go get a map, why don't you just, I might use a question. I might say, hey, do you think you might need to look at some maps? Or I might say any of these questions, how would you explain that? Or give me some other examples. Or does that really make sense? You can ask questions, but you don't give answers. Another great tip is to create a coaching guide for you so that when you're implementing your problem-based learning unit, you know when you need to step in, provide some more direction, maybe do a little mini lesson, maybe provide a different material. It's a great way to provide some structure and some planning, right? And it may look like this. This is what Sheila Gallagher uses, where she checks off with which of those 5 phases she's going to be thinking about, and she jots down some notes before she teaches it. Here's some ideas and some questions I think the kids might have. Here's an assessment I want to give, or here's an activity I want to do with the kids. And another great tool is to have the students keep a problem log. A problem log is basically just a journal, but they write down their research notes, they write down their questions, they might create a graph, they write down their thoughts as they're going through the problem. This is a great tool for you as a teacher to collect those real quick, look through them and see where they are in the process and see some of their thinking. Now, I want to spend just a couple minutes and not much but you can really take a problem-based learning unit and blow it up to be a huge, amazing integrated curriculum model unit, because one of the three components of the integrated curriculum model, which is the most well-researched model in all of gifted education, is, if you look at Roman numeral 3, a higher level thinking process. Well, problem-based learning is one of those pieces, right? All you have to do to really expand on your problem-based learning scenario or lesson is to add in a universal concept, which I'll explain in a minute, and come up with some interdisciplinary advanced content. Here are 3 units that I've written, and I'll show how that aligns with the integrated curriculum model. So the first is the microscopic monsters unit. The concept that every lesson, all 30 lessons in the unit addresses is perseverance, right? Because it takes time and effort and patience to get through a pandemic, which we all are aware of right now. The advanced content is epidemiology and microbiology. This unit was designed for 4th and 5th graders, right? That's advanced for them. And the scenario was, like I showed you earlier, students take on the role of being an official planning for how their town can withstand, be protected from this virus. Another example is exploring America's national parks. The concept is exploration, and the advanced content is geography, landforms, and habitats. And the scenario is they are told, guess what? The US government has launched a new competition to see where the latest, the newest and greatest new national park is going to be. They're taking proposals and suggestions. Do some research, send them your ideas. And there's more structure to it than that, but that's the scenario in general. And Dinosaurs to Jones, that unit. The concept is change over time. The advanced content is paleontology, and the problem-based learning scenario is they're in a fictional dig, they uncover a fossil, and they have to determine what to do next, because it may be found on private land, which means you could potentially keep it. It may be on federal land, and you have to contend with the federal law. There's so many different nuances that the students have to work through. So you can take that and really expand upon it. And why is this good for gifted kids? Because gifted kids are precocious, intense, and complex, and they can think in complex ways. More research here, and there's some other things in this slide, in this part of the presentation to show my process, but this is also on my website if you wanted to look at it. Perseverance, right? And I said interdisciplinary advanced content. For the microscopic monsters unit, I connected language arts because we looked at and read the biographies of famous epidemiologists. I connected math because we looked at exponential growth. We connected science, of course, because of microbiology, and social studies and the history of the World Health Organization and past pandemics. Lots of ways to really tie in multiple areas. And then I mapped out my unit from there. And with a pre-test and a post-test and all of that. If you are interested in learning more about how to design units like this, or more about problem-based learning, I've created a little mini online self-paced course for teachers, and you can register for it and go, if you go to my website, Not More of the Same. And what you'll see is, as you if you choose to enroll in the class, you will receive one-on-one feedback from me, and I can help you through the process. There's lots of resources and tools there for you if you wanted to take a look at it. But here's some resources, some things for you to some places for you to look at. There's a free problem-based learning journal from Purdue. I've put some of my favorite websites here. Buck Institute is one of them. There's a university called Gulf Coast University that teaches all their classes through problem-based learning, and they have a rubric for developing problem-based learning scenarios, so that's out there. See, Sheila Gallagher has an amazing book called Problem-Based Learning in Your Classroom. It's a teacher's resource guide. It's at Rural Fireworks Press, and she has wonderful, probably 12 or more pre-made units already developed. I have 2 units from Royal Fireworks Press. One is Feats and Flops and one is Quests and Quandaries. That's available. And in 2021, I'll be launching a new series of books called Inquiry-Based Science Lessons for Gifted and Advanced Learners with Proofrock, and the 3 titles are listed there for you. Just quickly, let me do review before I take some questions. The most important elements of a problem-based learning unit or lesson are listed here. It needs to be interdisciplinary, ill-structured, real-world and authentic. Collaboration needs to be involved here. There needs to be some debriefing at the end, some self and peer assessment, and based on the standards, based on the curriculum, but you can go beyond the grade level standards if students are ready for that. So let me stop here. First of all, let me put my email address on the screen real quick for you, but let me stop here. Heather.
Well, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Jason? I've received a couple that we've answered, and I will post all of the links in the chat, which is happening right now. And also, I'll be sending all of those links out at the end of this session. However, Dr. McIntosh, will you be sending me your PowerPoint so that I can include that in the email to all of the attendees?
If you can, I've put it on my website. So
okay.
if you can just send that website link, they can go right there. And then there is one of the tabs at the top is free resources, and it's listed there at the bottom of the list for them to download.
Perfect. That's great. That's a lot of great information, and Sheila Gallagher is awesome, so that's going to be some great information for everybody to go and review. I'm not sure if you could see the chat, but it says, you inspire to make learning more engaging. My wheels are spinning on an Arizona project for the kids. I know that my kids love solving problems and using that, so I think this is a really good tool to implement in the classroom. So
wonderful. And I would encourage everyone to begin to share ideas, share your problems that you create, because we can help each other. We don't have to do it alone. And I find that I might have a real good nugget of an idea, but then I share it with another teacher and they're like, oh, you know what I did with it? Wow, I took it to the next level by adding such and such. So find a good group of teachers and share your ideas.
Oh, definitely. I do have a question. How long do you allow for a PBL? Meaning, how much time during the week do kids work on it, and how many weeks do you allow for completion?
Okay, so let me start out by saying, when I teach a problem-based learning lesson or unit, I'm working with gifted students in a pull-out program. And so I'm no longer a teacher, I'm a coordinator, but when I did teach, I saw my students 2 or 3 times a week for upwards of 45 minutes each time. And so we spent an entire 9 weeks just on one of those problem-based learning units. In the regular classroom, it might be completely different. I know it would be, because you're teaching more than just these extensions and enrichment activities. So it all depends on the problem. It depends on your goals and the standards. I mean, if you're going to teach, let's say, social studies and math in the same unit, well, guess what? You've kind of bought some more time for this problem-based learning scenario, because you can take a little bit of time for math and a little bit of time from social studies and put them together. So that is a good way to do it. But it depends.
So Debbie's wondering if SWAG is story, wonder, and grit. Is that right?
Yes, and the A is authenticity, I believe.
Okay, story, wonder, authenticity, grit.
Yes.
Got it. Okay, any other questions before we close out here? Still have a few minutes if anybody has anything else you'd like to ask. All right. Looks like that's all we've got. Got a lot of positive feedback here. This was the best. Thank you. I agree with that, Jason. This was the best. Thank you. think
Just
that
make
this is
sure
great.
too that reach out. If you can email me anytime, I love to collaborate with teachers. So if you think of a
There we go.
question later, just email me.
That works. All right, I think I got my. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and we'll. Oh, I saw another question. Hold on one second. Let me see what
Okay.
that said. um, doesn't let me. Okay, thank you. Awesome. I want to take your class. And Deborah Brooke says, you were my first class to get certification and my last.
Oh, that's
I
awesome.
just, she
I
just
thought I
completed her
recognized that
hours.
name. Congratulations.
Christina Gordon wants to know if you'd be able to do this with general education.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's good for all kids.
Perfect. All right. And then how does this work with Genius Hour?
Hmm. Wow. That's I see it complementing it quite well, especially if you have the students working in an area of passion that they're interested in, right? Then you could develop a problem specific to their area of interest. Or you could partner students up and have them write problems for each other. I've done that once or twice, and the kids love it.
All right. Okay, now I think I have all of the questions answered. Do we have
All
any
right.
more? Okay. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. All the AAGT Informs episodes that have been recorded, you can find them on our website at arizonagifted.org/AAGT Informs episodes, or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, which you can find that up in the upper top corner of our website. Make sure you click the bell so you get notifications for when new episodes are released. The surveys are available right now and for future viewing, so no matter when you watch an episode, you can give us your feedback on each webinar, because that is important to us to hear what you guys are learning or what you're needing, or if you're finding these valuable, because that helps us keep providing information for you in the future. And that's also how you get your professional development certificate. So if you fill that out, you'll get that within the next 24 hours. So we just want to say thank you again for joining us today, and we will see you next Wednesday at 4 o'clock. Everybody have a great evening.
Bye.